Hey guys, this is Camfrey15 back at it with another video for you guys, and I'm back with another fairy tale arc review in my, redos of these arc reviews and during my, rewatch of Fairy Tale. But yes, last video we covered the Phantom Lord arc, and in this video we are going to cover two arcs, one little mini short one, and then my favorite arc of Fairy Tale when it comes to starting off this series, which is the Tower of Heaven arc, which is focused on our girl Erza Scarlet. But yes, two of my favorite arcs are, well, Tower of Heaven is one of my favorite arcs, if not my favorite arc of the beginning arcs of this series. But yeah, Loki, I like Loki too. Now, because of the things I know I've been making the last few videos of this, including the chapters and episodes, you can check these out. If say you want to get kicks and giggles and get good memories of them. I combine these two arcs, so I don't really have the separation of the arcs. And anyways, the Loki arc is short as is, so that's why I'm putting this. So the Loki and Tower of Heaven arcs combine of chapters 48 and 102, and anime episodes go from episode 30 to episode 41. Now, some pretty big characters in other than the characters, main cast of characters we know in this arc is, for example, Loki, who is played by Eric Vale. Eric Vale, we know who Eric Vale is. Now, again, I'm giving really the English dub voice actors, not the Japanese, because I watch the English dub. But again, like I said, no discredit to the Japanese dub. That's just how I operate. I prefer dubs over subs. But if I have to watch a sub, I'll watch it. But Eric Vale, if you watch any dub content, you know Eric Vale is damn near in almost probably 90% of the anime you watch. Obviously, his biggest role is Future Trunks, or any alliteration of adult Trunks, but it's mostly his Future Trunks performance. So yeah, Karen. Now I didn't put down her voice actor, but she's played by Stephanie Young. Now her biggest role, obviously, I would say is Nico Robin in my case of things, and I love hearing Stephanie Young's voices. I think her voice is just so seductive. I don't know, it's just me, but Karen's a big thing in the Loki stuff. Ares, we get introduced to Ares here. The Social Spirit King makes his first appearance here. Now, in terms of the Celestial Spirit, I mean, in terms of the Tower of Heaven arc, we have obviously main man Jellal, voice act by Robert McCollum, who he voice acts some characters that are pretty familiar that I know are adult Goten. Yeah, it's very rare he does that because the only time he's ever done adult Goten was literally at the end of the Dragon Ball Z dub and in Dragon Ball Z Kai, the final chapters, or even Dragon Ball GT. But other than that, he hasn't made another voicing for adult Goten. I'm a Dragon Ball fan, and I'm still waiting for Trunks and Goten to finally age into teenagers or at least adults so we can actually progress how old they look. Yeah, I know. Anyways, and then I would say a pretty big role in his case, and hell, if you watch the dub for this anime, One Piece, it's currently airing on Funimation and producing new episodes every damn month. And he also voice acts the great One Piece villain, definitely a top five, if not the best One Piece villain of all time up to this point, Doflamingo. So yes. Another big character is Ultir, and her voice actor was Lydia McKay. She voice acts Nanaba from Attack on Titan. I haven't watched Attack on Titan. I know, kill me. But she also voice acts another big One Piece character, Boa Hancock, which is pretty. I think she does a good job as Ultir in her role, especially later on. And then other characters are Simon, Miliana, Sho, and Wally. I didn't put their voice actors because they're somewhat minor characters. Really, three of the four are minor characters. Miliana's a little bit of a minor character. She appears later on here and there, but she's kind of just a character relegated to minor stuff and things like that. But anyways, let's get into the Loki arc, which takes place directly after the Phantom Lord arc. And essentially after the battle against Phantom Lord, some of Loki's girlfriends come by the guild as they're rebuilding opposite the guild hall. They're asking like, "Where's Loki?" Because he broke up with us. And even Gray makes a mention like, "Yeah, Loki left Fairy Tale," and stuff like that. But when Lucy uses her celestial spirit Crux, she finds out that Loki apparently had some sort of relationship with a celestial wizard named Karen. Now, even in the beginning, we see that Loki isn't really too keen of hanging around Lucy because for some reason he does not like being around celestial wizards. This arc kind of mostly explains that. Now, we find out when Lucy finds out, she finds out that Karen died a few years ago and stuff like that. Now, after all the whole news of everybody finding out that Loki has quit Fairy Tale, Lucy looks for him, and then eventually she finds him at Karen's gravesite. And essentially, she sees Loki kind of disappearing between the human world and I guess the afterlife. And that's essentially when she finds out that Loki, in reality, is not a human. He's been a celestial spirit this entire time, which there have been other characters in the past few arcs when it comes to Loki, have mentioned like you're different than what a regular wizard would be and stuff like that. And essentially, Loki's dying because he's been in the human world way too long, and celestial spirits cannot be in the human world for long periods of time. And he's been in like the human world for like I think they said the last 3 years, and he's even outlived like his use of being there and stuff like that. Now we find out Loki isn't just any ordinary celestial spirit. He's one of the celestial spirits from the 12 zodiac keys. And his real name is Leo the Lion. Now, and we get some background information to his past, and we find out that he was originally contracted to this girl or this celestial spirit wizard in Blue Pegasus named Karen. But because of the way Karen treated him and his comrade Ares, who was another member of the Zodiac keys, and essentially abused him and things like that, pretty hard like gutting stuff that she was doing and things like that. And essentially, Loki opens his own gate and tells Karen to release him and Ares because they can't take the abuse anymore. And over time, Karen's trying to, I guess you can say, negotiate with Loki to just go back so she can be able to do jobs. And over time, she doesn't. And over time, she can't find any work because she can't access any more of her keys because Loki's the only one out, and it's draining her magic power. Eventually, it comes to a point where Karen just honestly said, screw this, I'm going to go on my job. And she goes on a job, essentially kind of butt naked, which, in other words, I mean, no ways to do her celestial spirit magic or any access to magic. And she ends up dying in the result. And because of it, Master Bob from Blue Pegasus tells Loki that she died, and Loki kind of blames himself for Karen's death, and he feels that the only way to atone for his sins is that he just lives life as much as he can until he eventually is dead. And even because of this, the Celestial Spirit King says that since he essentially broke a contract or breach of things and did something that broke Celestial Spirit laws, he essentially can never return to the Celestial Spirit world and stuff like that. But Lucy essentially, when she finds this all information, she doesn't want that. So she cries out saying that it isn't his fault, but the fact that his former master, his former contracted person died and stuff like that, because he felt otherwise that he felt like he was being wrong. And within all her might, she tries to close Loki's gate. But this gets the attention of the Celestial Spirit King, and the Celestial Spirit King then reassures Lucy, saying, listen, I would love Loki to come back to the Celestial Spirit world, but what's like I said, he broke the contract and that's it. And essentially Lucy, using all her magic power, essentially brings it all her spirit she owns, and essentially kind of says that, we all feel different, and essentially, I don't want this to happen to him. Essentially, further hitting the point how much Lucy does care about celestial spirits, because she knows celestial spirits are beings just like her and other humans, the fact that they have their own thoughts, their own feelings, and their own personalities and stuff like that. And because of this, this captivates the celestial spirit king, and seeing how much Lucy loves celestial spirits. And because of it, he managed to let Loki go back to the celestial spirit world. Loki essentially makes a contract with Lucy to be in her party and join her ranks in her celestial spirit army, I guess you can say. And that's it. He thanks Lucy for saving him and believing in him, and that he won't let her down. This arc again was a nice arc. Loki or Leo, whatever you want to call him. I prefer Loki. But even though Loki isn't a main character, I like the fact that they give him a nice little spotlight, and it's honestly shown over this entire series. You know, there are many characters in the Fairy Tale Guild that are kind of minor characters compared to your big four, which are Natsu, Lucy, Erza, and Gray. And I get a really big five if you count Wendy up in there too. But, you know, I like the fact that, you know, they give these side minor characters pretty interesting stories where you feel for the characters and you understand from where they're coming from and stuff like that. And it gives you the whole sympathy. I've seen a few fairy tale videos, especially Nux Taku's video. He mentioned the fact that there really is no main character in Fairy Tale. The guild is the main character because we follow the guild on their adventure, on their journey and stuff like that. Which honestly, I like that analogy. Even though, you know, a few characters get featured more than other characters, at the end of the day, you're following along this guild journey. Essentially throughout the series and stuff like that. But yeah, now this is when we get into the Tower of Heaven arc. Now during the fact, you know, during that they're building or rebuilding their guild hall, Loki actually comes out after telling everybody that he's really a celestial spirit, and he actually gives them these resort tickets to go to Akane Beach. So this is where the Tower of Heaven arc takes place at. So essentially, obviously the quadruplet members of Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Erza all go to Akane Beach to get a vacation, some relaxation and stuff like that after everything that's happened to them. I guess you can say the past few arcs. When it comes to the point where they go to this casino, eventually old friends of Erza's come to attack her new friends and essentially capture Erza, saying that you betrayed us and you betrayed Jellal, most importantly, and that you're gonna face him sooner or later and stuff like that. And these people that attack them are Sho, Simon, Miliana, and Wally and stuff like that. So they eventually take Erza away and stuff like that. Now, when we cut over, where they're taking him is the tower. Where they're taking Erza is the Tower of Heaven to go see Jellal and stuff like that. Now, one of the members of Jellal's forces asked Jellal why they just didn't kill Erza to begin with. And essentially he's like, well, the reason why is because I'm just going to offer up as a sacrifice for my Grandmaster plan. Now, in terms of the Magic Council side of things, they're hearing about what Jellal's plan is. And thanks to Seagrain, he tells everybody else in the council the fact that the Tower of Heaven essentially is done, and that it's essentially going to create this system called the R system to be able to be fully operated. And essentially, Seagrain tells all the other Magic Councils that they have to use the Etherion cannon to stop Jellal, his twin brother plan. Otherwise, he's going to get what he wants with the R system. And his plan is to revive the Black Wizard Zareth, who was a very evil, who's a wizard from ancient times in the fairy tale universe, who was very evil and made things like the Lullaby and Deliora, who all hail from the Book of Zareth. Even future demons we see later on from his creations and stuff like that, or from his Book of Zareth and stuff like that. Now, some members in the Magic Council are against this, but eventually with enough persuading, and mostly because the whole, oh, he's trying to resurrect Zareth, that's kind of gets the whole Magic Council to get on board with this. And they're like, yeah, there was only like one member, it was the one old guy, I forgot his name, that was totally against this. And then he eventually overhears that, this was a part of Seagrain and Ultir's plan and stuff like that. So yeah, so Natsu and the others, they eventually get into the Tower of Heaven, and they manage to beat some of the fodder in there. Natsu eventually runs off because they also took Happy too. So he goes to eventually find Happy. He runs into this cat room. Nothing much to talk about there. It's kind of just overview, pointless stuff right then and there. But it was funny comedic stuff when he got the whole cat thing stuck on his head and stuff like that. Now, Lucy, Gray, and Juvia, which I forgot to mention, Juvia appears in this arc full time since the Phantom Lord arc, and she tells Gray earlier in the casino that she has an interest in joining Fairy Tail and stuff like that after everything that has happened. But as I said, those three run into Erza, and this is when Erza essentially tells them to go home, but they're not going to go home, and that's when they essentially ask Erza, like, yo, what's going on? It seems like you know what's going on. So we get the backstory of Erza. Essentially, we find out that Erza, when she was a kid, was essentially imprisoned in a slave camp, essentially building up the Tower of Heaven for this cult group and stuff like that. Eventually it comes to something where they catch her doing something, but it was really Sho who did it. He just didn't speak up. But Erza gets taken away. She ends up losing legit her eye because of it. We don't see how she lost it, but she ends up doing it. Jellal actually comes in to save her, but eventually gets to the point where they get overwhelmed and Jellal gets taken away while she gets forcibly back. Now, we see in Jellal's case, because of the hatred he had in his heart and stuff like that, we see this evil projection professing himself to being obviously the Black Wizard Zareth himself, and essentially it takes over his mind and it makes his whole attitude about him change, and the kind, carrying Jellal person he once was is gone, and now essentially he's possessed by this person, by this spirit, this evil spirit. In order to essentially fight for Jellal and get him back and save him because she has feelings for him, Erza then starts a rebellion, and she starts a fight. But when the cult officials bring these magic users, eventually it looks like Erza's going to die, but this guy named Grandpa Rob essentially sacrifices his life for Erza. And on his back, he had the tattoo of Fairy Tail because he was a fairy tale wizard at a point, and stuff like that. And he hopes, and as he's in his dying breath, he hopes to tell Erza that he hopes she can find her freedom, and stuff like that. And because of this makes Erza essentially awaken her magic, and she takes out everyone everyone out in sight. And when she tries to go retrieve Jellal and save him, Jellal is already different and changed for the worse. He essentially takes out the two cult leaders and essentially saying that he's going to continue building the Tower of Heaven, and he would like Erza at his side. But Erza clearly is like, no, I don't want this. Don't you want to be free and stuff like that? Don't you want to have everybody go? And essentially Jellal is like, well, if you want to go, you can go, but leave everybody here. If not, I'm going to kill everybody and stuff like that. Or if you tell them anything, I will kill them. And essentially Erza's kind of, I guess you can say, kind of handcuffed there. And that's why other characters like Sho believe that she betrayed them and stuff like that instead of finding out the truth. But because of this, Sho overheard this in the background, and he was shocked about that Jellal was lying this entire time to them and stuff like that. And even Simon comes in, and we find out with Simon, he never believed any of Jellal's words, and he was just kind of waiting for Erza to come back, maybe to save them. And he was always on Erza's side and stuff like that, mostly because we find out that Simon has always had feelings for Erza since they were kids and stuff like that. Now, as I'm going through my notes, because I got my notes, Erza again makes a mention to, obviously your guildmates, that's saying that Zareth once upon a time was an evil wizard, created Lullaby, did Deliora, so that throws everybody off thing. And essentially, because of this. And Jellal seeing all this, he's like, well, fine then. I guess if everybody's gonna just turn on me, then I'm gonna need the help of my assistants. So he essentially gets three members of this guild called from this assassin guild called Death's Head Caucus, and these three are Trinity Raven. Now these guys are Fukaru, Vildas, and Ikaruga. Now Natsu fights Fukuro a little bit, but then gets swallowed whole. So Gray eventually takes him on. And in Gray's battle, essentially he's recalling the time when Erza first came to Fairy Tale, and how you could say he kind of befriended her. At first, he was kind of hostile towards her because he thought she thought she was better than him, and Gray didn't want to take no. I guess you could say. I guess you could say any punishment and thinking and having her think that way. So essentially, it gets to the point where he's trying to fight, her and everything. And he sees her near this cliffside, and when she turns around, he sees her crying, and she's like, "What do you want? Do you want another fight?" And essentially, Gray's like, "I won't fight you," and stuff like that. It's because you're crying, and why are you crying? And things like that. And that's kind of how it started the friendship between Erza and Gray. Again, Erza is probably one of the saddest backstories. Like, it literally is one of the saddest backstories, I would say, in anime history. I would honestly say that it's one of the most emotional, sad backstories. And so that it still gets me to tear up a bit, just seeing it and stuff like that, especially seeing young Erza do all that crying. And I forgot to mention, too, essentially, like the Gray arc, it's essentially Erza coming with terms to her past and needing to understand that, yes, everything happened in her past was bad and stuff like that. But at some point, you're going to have to overcome and get over that past. Otherwise, you're never, ever going to move on from that. And we see that, just like in Gray's case, she hardened her heart when it came to this, and she didn't want any help from her friends at the time of this, when this was all going on, and she tried to take this all on her lonesome, and not realizing that if she had did that, she would have fell victim, and she would have probably more than likely died, just like Gray almost did in the Galuna Island arc. So I like the fact that in both the Gray and Erza arcs, they have a whole thing of dealing and coping with your past and moving on and opening your heart up instead of hardening it and trying to make it more of a burden on yourself. I really do like that. And especially I do like the fact that Natsu in both the arcs has a pretty big influential piece in them essentially not forcing themselves to kill themselves and stuff like that. But but essentially Gray defeats Fukuro. And yeah, now Lucy and Juvia team with the fight Vitalis, who essentially isn't affected by Juvia's water magic because his hair can absorb it. But because he does a spell, it makes Juvia essentially under his control. And when it looks like Lucy's going to lose, Juvia's true feelings comes out saying that, understanding that Fairy Tail is different than most people, and that she wants to join Fairy Tail, and that she's glad that she can call Lucy a friend and stuff like that. Because of this makes Lucy call upon Aquarius to make Juvia snap out of her whole thing, and they end up doing a unison raid, which a unison raid is essentially a combined magic attack between two wizards who essentially can dish out a very powerful blow. It's not the last time we see unison raids, especially when it comes to Juvia and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. Now Erza, she fights Ikaruga, and during out this fight, she's trying to use all her different armors and stuff like that. It is a way to say that she's hardening her heart and she's not opening up. But it comes to a point because Ikaruga is defeating all her armies, to the point where she just essentially goes down to bare clothes, essentially, just bare cloth of clothes, and she beats her by essentially finally realizing she has to open up her heart because her friends in Fairy Tail has changed her for the better and stuff like that. Eventually, she confronts Jellal, and they kind of get into a little scuffle, but it gets to the point where Erza looks like she has the upper hand at the time of the Etherion cannon being fired. But when it is fired, we find out that essentially it was all in the plan for Jellal, and it essentially creates a whole, I guess you can say, giant lacrima crystal. At the same time, it looked like before they were about to die, Jellal and Erza were giving, I guess you can say, a romantic embrace, because obviously Erza cares about him and she clearly likes him and she clearly has feelings for him. But to her dismay, that's not how Jellal feels. Jellal essentially puts up this binding snake spell on her as a way to make her immobile and essentially force her into, I guess you can say, the sacrifice, so she can, I guess, have the essence of Zareth come into her body or recreate Zareth essentially. As I drink my water or my juice. Now, before her full body is eventually absorbed into the R system, Natsu manages to pull her out and save her, and this is when he confronts Jellal and fights her. Now, at first, but before this, he knocks Erza out, and he kind of makes the mention to Jellal saying, "I don't know what the hell's been going on in Erza's past, and nor that's none of my business to deal with. But all I know is I could feel her shaking, like I never felt her shaking before, and she was actually crying. And I never heard that type of, I never seen that side of Erza where she looks like she was shaking, in fear. She was crying, and she didn't look confident. She didn't look like the Erza I know when I go back to Fairy Tale all the time, which is, I would say, a nice thing for Natsu to mention, because he knows Erza as this, really, I guess, stoic-like personality, this person that he looks up to, that he admires, the fact that, she's a very stoic, she's a very serious character, and just to see this idol of mine, actually afraid, actually crying, actually shaking in my arms, and stuff like that, that hurts me, and I don't want to see that side of Erza again. So he confronts Jellal and he starts fighting him, but Jellal, because he has the powers. Oh, and then I forgot to mention too earlier. Seagrain actually shows up, and it's later revealed that Seagrain isn't the brother of Jellal. He was essentially a copy of Jellal to infiltrate the Magic Council. And at the Magic Council, essentially, Ultra is using her Arc of Time magic to essentially, I guess you can say, deteriorate the Magic Council and kind of essentially sacrifice her life and take them all out in the process. So yeah. Now going back to the Natsu Jellal fight, they start off that fight, and Natsu essentially gets utterly destroyed. And it gets to the point where Jellal is about to use this one spell that seemingly is going to kill Natsu, but it looks like Erza is going to step in and take the attack and probably sacrifice her life. But then Simon steps in front and he sacrifices his life. And in his dying breaths, he tells Erza that he always loved her, and he dies. And this breaks Erza. This pisses off Natsu. Natsu starts eating the lacrima that contained like crazy amounts of ether nano in him. And now we're getting to the part where this is one of the most controversial parts of this arc, where a lot of people said Natsu should have never defeated Jellal because this guy is like at 10 wizard saint levels, and stuff like that. Now I'm not the best in explaining this and stuff like that. Again, if you want a better explanation, go check out Next Taku's video about this whole thing. This was a huge talking debate how people think Natsu got a pretty BS, I guess you can say, power up. I personally don't think it's pretty BS. Next Taku explains it pretty fairly well, the fact of the relationship between Natsu and Erza there, and how everything Erza is about isn't what Jellal is fighting for, while, over time, Erza has had all this, love for Fairy Tale and guild stuff. Again, I'm not explaining the best and everything, but listen, I think the power boost is kind of justified because you're kind of getting an increase in magic power. Natsu's getting an increase in magic power by eating this ether nano. And then on top of it, too, if you want to go even further in the logic, Natsu accesses his Dragon Force powers in the first time. And we know throughout the series, when a Dragon Slayer activates their Dragon Force powers, they are immensely strong than their base regular state. and this was the first time Natsu has done this. So I think it's pretty valid to explain how Natsu defeated him. Him eating the ether nano essentially gave him a boost in his magic power, as well as also stacking the Dragon Force abilities on top of that increase, which the Dragon Force increases his strength like crazy, can make you understand, okay, now that makes sense to why Natsu defeated Jellal and stuff like that. Again, if you say otherwise, more power to you. That's personally how I feel, and I think it makes complete sense, especially the fact that Natsu transforms into his Dragon Force form. So I think it makes complete sense there. So other than that, because of this, Natsu defeats Jellal, but after all that's going on, the Lacrima crystal is essentially blowing up and everything. But this comes to the point where Erza realizes she's probably the only person that can stop the explosion from happening to save all her friends. So she tries to sacrifice her life, even though Natsu's looking at this and he doesn't want it to happen. And this is when Erza, I guess you can say, dreams a reality of what would happen if she ended up dying. And we see a kind of, I guess, bleak, dark future of everybody mourning her death and Natsu really being the one fairy tale member not to fully get over this and stuff like that. And Erza's, says that she didn't want to do this to make everybody sad. She wanted to do this to essentially save everybody. But we find out that that really didn't happen. Natsu somehow managed to save Erza. He is carrying her in her arms and she realizes this. And then essentially, Natsu essentially tells Erza not to do this again, not to sacrifice your life like that again. And Erza makes the promise. And the one thing I do like is the fact that, we get some more background to the reason why she cries out of one eye. We find out that Porla Yusuka gave her a fake eye, a new eye, which is kind of like a kind of fake eye, but it operates like a real eye and everything. The fact is she can only cry out of one eye, though. In this scene, when she's finally embracing with Natsu and stuff like that, she cries out of both eyes, which was a very emotional moment and stuff like that. Now, I know in my first review of this, I said you can kind of make this like, I guess, Natsa shipping or whatever the official term for Erza x Natsu. I think it's a nice moment, but I wouldn't go as far to say this is a shipping moment between the two. I think it's just two good friends embracing each other, and one of them telling them, never ever scare me like that, trying to kill yourself because you mean a lot to me in my life and stuff like that. And again, even honestly, in my opinion, I feel like if Erza was never meant to be with Jellal, I feel like if Juvia wasn't in the picture to hook up with Gray, honestly, I would have been down to see a Gray x Erza shit, because you can clearly see that they have a lot of chemistry, that they care about each other. Hell, in the first few arcs, you can probably figure that, do these characters like have some sort of feelings to each other, because they seem like they like each other. But yeah. Two, Erza kind of speculates the fact of what happened to Lacrima. Essentially, she kind of says because the Lacrima explosion kind of just floated up into the air, and she was thinking that maybe that good side of Jellal somehow came back, and he forcibly flourished the Lacrima up into the air so that nobody died and stuff like that. We find out that Juvia had already up and left to go leave for Fairy Tail to go join the guild, which we'll see her in the next arc, which is the Battle of Fairy Tail arc and stuff like that. Now, obviously, they're having a nice little hangout with Sho, Wally, and Miliana. Erza requests that they go to Fairy Tail with them. At first, they go, but then they realize they want to go enjoy their own freedom and see what the world is like, because they never got to have that chance of that freedom since they were always tied up helping Jellal build the Tower of Heaven. So you get a heartfelt, emotional goodbye between Erza and her friends, essentially saying that, yes, this is goodbye for now, but I know one day we will see each other again. And it was emotional. It was an emotional goodbye to a very emotional, heart-stringing arc, which I think, like I said, out of the first few arcs this series has to offer, this is my favorite arc of the first few from the start of Fairy Tail to the Battle of Fairy Tail, arc. This is my favorite arc out of those arcs. It was very heart touching, very heartwarming. You know, essentially, like I said earlier with the gray stuff, it was Erza essentially trying to confront her past and essentially moving on from that past instead of being stuck in the past, because it's the same thing with real life. You get stuck in your past, you're never going to progress further down in life, and you're never going to move on from it. So what people always need to do is accept, okay, what you did in the past, what happened in the past happened. You have to move on with it and deal with it, and just deal with the ramifications because of that. And who knows, maybe your life actually turns out for the better. In Erza's case, she found people who she can consider friends, family, and stuff like that, people who treasure her more than anything, and things like that. So yeah, this arc was good. I really did felt the heartstring emotions of Erza and everything. I did like the character, connections with Gray and Natsu, especially in their individual fights, because you can feel that they clearly have admiration, respect, and they clearly, at the end of the day, they love Erza because that's their friend. That's somebody they see as their big sister. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what the relationship is. Erza is kind of the big sister to Gray and Natsu, even though she always breaks up the fight and she gets into arguments with them and stuff like that. At the end of the day, she clearly cares about them and she wants what's best for them. As the same way, you can say the same way for both Gray and Natsu and stuff like that, which shows the friendship between the three characters, and stuff like that. But that's kind of where I'm gonna end off this video. Like I said, these both arcs, not only the Loki but the Tower of Heaven arc, they were both good in their own ways. And next time we're going to be recapping the final arc of the intro to this series of Fairy Tail, and that is the Battle of Fairy Tail arc, where Loxus makes his thing, and that's kind of his whole character development arc right then and there. But other than that, if you guys like the video, leave a like, put in the comment section your thoughts on this week's episode of our this arc review for Fairy Tail. Do you like the Loki and the Tower of Heaven arc, or do you have some other opinions on it? What are also your thoughts on Jellal versus Natsu? Do you think Natsu got a BS power up pull, or do you think his power up was valid? And if so, explain why. Again, hit that subscribe button if you want to get more Fairy Tail arc reviews. Until then, I'm going to catch you guys in the next video, and I'll see you guys for the next Fairy Tail arc review for the Battle of Fairy Tail arc. Other than that, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Stay safe and have fun. Peace.